Moneyweb Now, on the money.
Chatting now with John-Paul Fraser, Team Lead Cross-Border Taxation at Tax Consulting SA. John-Paul, appreciate the early morning time. If we're looking at expats before the March 2021, you could, as I understand, withdraw retirement funds immediately upon formalizing the immigration process. That's with both SARS and SARB. Since then, however, there's a 3-year lock-in rule that is applied. In other words, you actually can't touch the money until 3 years after you have effectively immigrated. Is that a fair reflection of the current status quo in South Africa?
Very good morning, Simon. Pleasure to be here early, and a very good synopsis. At this stage, we are obviously getting used to the new two-pot system. I think a lot of people are quite liking it at the moment in terms of their savings pot. But yes, your two pots, other than your savings pot, which is your retirement investment pot, are subject to a 3-year lock-in rule, which is essentially a 3-year lock-in period from the date you formalize your non-tax residency application.
And that two-pot does, however, then make a loophole of sorts, because it's not part of the 3-year wait. So if you have left within the last 3 years, you can access not all of it, of course, but some of that money sitting in the savings pot.
Definitely. I think that's where everyone's quite loving the two-pot system at the moment. But your savings pot, accessible immediately. You get one withdrawal per annum or per tax year, but it's available immediately. So there's no 3-year waiting period in that regard at all. Correct.
But will it still be taxed, however? And because if I withdraw and I'm a South African resident and taxpayer, I get taxed at my marginal rate, nice and clean in that regard. But if I've sort of emigrated and living, I don't know, somewhere else, is it still subject to tax?
It definitely still is. Firstly, for as long as you're still a tax resident, it would be fully taxable in South Africa. For those expats who have formalized their non-tax residency, it would still be subject to tax. But the interesting thing is your savings pot portion is taxed on your normal, like you mentioned, marginal tax rate. So, for example, an expat who hasn't been working here in the previous year or earning any remuneration, their two-pot savings pot withdrawal, obviously, incredibly low tax or no tax at all in terms of their threshold. But your lump sum withdrawals in terms of your retirement invested pot, those are taxed on your lump sum tax tables. So even though you're abroad, it's still fully taxable here.
Yeah, I get you on that. There's also a note that you made that I hadn't actually realized, which I thought, and it's moving off track from the two-pot. But essentially, when you cease tax residency, you've deemed to have disposed of assets at market value, and this can create some capital gains tax. And this would be, SARS looks at it as your worldwide assets. So suddenly you potentially got capital gains events on, I don't know, a property in London that you might not have sold and you might not have cash flow.
100% correct. That's why it's also important just to almost plan your non-tax residency, The last thing you do want is to be caught with a bit of capital gains tax on, and a real life scenario was a property in London, Your capital gains tax on that is astronomical. So definitely something to avoid. We can backdate your non-tax residency if you're only applying now to the date you depart. Sometimes offers the relief that you do need there.
Back to two-pot, SARS has got almost 12 billion in tax revenue. This is a lot more than their anticipated 5 billion. South Africans are jumping into it. I mean, by accounts, almost 3 million South Africans have taken some money out, and of course it's now the new year, and they can take another slug of cash out, and certainly it seems that they are.
They definitely are. I mean, bearing in mind, this only came into effect from September of last year. So we haven't even faced a full 12-month period, and like you said, just under 3 million individuals accessing their savings pot. In terms of the dispersion between the tax brackets, interestingly enough, there's not much difference between those earning in the lower brackets to those earning in the upper brackets. So definitely across the spectrum, South Africans making use of their two-pot savings withdrawal.
Yeah, I saw that 768,000 in the sub 18%, and then the sort of 30 to 40, 640 and 640 in the middle. That jumped out at me as well. And we are seeing by data again, the who was it? Retirement Matters Committee of the Actuarial Society of South Africa. It's a giant mouthful, but they're saying we are seeing a lot of repeat claims. Folks who took out in the first opportunity are coming back a second time.
Yeah, correct. And that is actually one of the fears that the two-pot savings pot at least bring in, is that you then start to rely on it as a form of income. which is obviously not its main purpose, So that is problematic, but that is what the stats are showing, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's supposed to be for emergencies, but it is available, and some folks will choose whether it is or isn't. But we'll leave it there. That's John-Paul Fraser, Team Lead, Cross-Border Taxation at Tax Consulting SA. Appreciate the early morning.